For me too. Okay, looks like we're getting started to record. And my partner here, Jen, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen Mayo. I'm the Director of Gift Planning and Advisor Relations.
We are going to be your guides today on this session on nonprofit funds at ECCF. And I want to just start by just saying, there are already, just by looking around, an array of folks representing organizations that are perhaps on the smaller side, that are on the larger side, that are covering all of many different parts of our county. This is, the beautiful part of being a part of a community foundation and even having a conversation like this. We start to get a taste for what the nonprofit sector looks like. And so I really just want to for one moment pause and begin all of this with a sense of gratitude for the work that you do. I know many of you are volunteers for these organizations, and not what you do just every day, but even just being here. Just thank you so much. You're incredibly important to Essex County, and we feel that with you. So, and I will say that given there are so many different types of organizations, that we recognize that you may be on many different levels of understanding or on a journey of deciding if this kind of investment is right for your organization. So know that while this presentation is going to be broad, and we will have some time for questions at the end, which we encourage, know that if you are thinking, okay, I want to continue that conversation after this, that Jen and I know this is a very individualized process, so that we're happy to have conversations ongoing as we move forward. So, Jen, should we throw up the first slide?
It's ready.
All right, so to just sort of level set and get everybody on the same page about actually who we are as a community foundation, we are on a mission to inspire philanthropy that strengthens the 34 cities and towns that make up our amazing Essex County. And we pursue that with 3 areas of focus. First, more than 300 individuals, families, businesses, and nonprofits trust ECCF as a partner to help maximize the impact of their charitable giving. And they do so by investing their charitable assets in one of 5 types of charitable funds that we offer, like a donor advised fund, a scholarship fund, and of course, a nonprofit fund. So this is, of course, where we'll be spending our deep dive time today as a group. Second, as a nonprofit community foundation, we know that a vibrant and inclusive Essex County comes from our strong nonprofit sector, because it's you all that care for our neighbors, that care for our open spaces, our communities as a whole. And we are here to support you and your organization through funding, education, and other tailored resources to support your capacity and your growth. And third, with an eye on the county as a whole, we really have a unique vantage point, which means that we see both, shared challenges and opportunities to collaborate across the county to bring about large-scale change. And that's really what our focus is in our community leadership initiatives. So we bring together leaders across the region to discuss, take action, and then ultimately to fund collaborative solutions that are important to all of us. So you might be familiar with some of the work that we do here in our Creative County Initiative and in our Advancing Digital Equity Initiative. So now that you have a little bit of a broader view about why we exist and what we do, you might understand a little bit more. Jen, can you move the slide forward? You might understand a little bit more about why we get so excited about talking about nonprofit funds to you. So if I was better at PowerPoint, this would be like less of an equation and more of a Venn diagram. That really shows the connectivity of our 2 core competencies, this investment of charitable assets and our commitment to strengthening nonprofits. And right at the center there exists these really unique vehicles that are called nonprofit funds. So let's dig into what a nonprofit fund actually is. So as you can all read here, a nonprofit fund is a charitable investment fund or vehicle to support and sustain a nonprofit's medium to long-term operations and goals. And I want to pause here for just a second, because there's a bit to unpack even in just that one sentence, especially if you are here trying to figure out if now is the right time for your organization to consider a nonprofit fund. Because the assets are invested, right, within this nonprofit fund, these assets are really earmarked for longer term goals, not your month-to-month operational expenses. This is not like your bank account where you're going to be, paying payroll on a monthly basis, for an example. It's really meant as a strategic tool to help you think long-term about some of the goals you have for your organization. And as I'm sure you'll hear many times throughout this presentation, working with the community foundation through a nonprofit fund is really like having an outsourced chief investment officer. So, we're focused on investing only charitable assets. And so we do so with an eye on prudent growth, with a lot of a support from an incredible investment committee. And with an outsourced CIO, you as an organization are really, taking away some of that you're freeing up some of that precious time that your executive team and that your board needs to focus on really more mission fulfillment. And then finally, I think we will drill this home for sure throughout the next hour, that, we offer this product in the context of a broader conversation, in a context of a broader partnership. So with ECCF, we hope that through this conversation, you understand that you can expect a relationship and a partnership really beyond the transaction of what a nonprofit fund actually is. Next slide, please, Jen. So let's just, again, keep digging into the nitty-gritty, how a nonprofit fund works. So you'll see there at the top of the little circle that it is actually the nonprofit that establishes the nonprofit fund. Contributions flow from the agency, from the nonprofit, into the nonprofit fund, and then those assets are then invested, and then grants flow back out to the fund. So it ends up being a closed loop here, which is really important. It's a relationship between your organization as a 501c3 and our status as a 501c3 nonprofit that allows that to happen in a really easy way. We also say that the contributions come from the organization and not from your donors, which we're going to contradict ourselves later a little bit, but you can hang on to that for a second. That typically the contributions are going to flow from your organization into the fund because it keeps the relationship with the donor at the nonprofit level, which really means then you understand the intentions and the goals of that, of the donations that you're receiving, and you guys get to make a decision around how to best use your assets. So that's just the very basic structure. The next level of detail is actually in how the nonprofit funds, or how the funds flow out of a nonprofit fund. So can you go to the next slide, Jen? So there's really two different types of nonprofit funds. There's a reserve fund and there's an endowed fund. So the reserve fund, you can really think of as like a rainy day fund, a place to invest your reserve funds that you may have perhaps in a bank, or it might be, longer term project funding. It's going to take some time to raise this money, and why not have that money invested and working for you in a different way? The way that money comes out of the fund is that you have, as an organization, two authorized representatives who request a grant out of the fund. ECCF receives the request, processes it, and sends a check directly to your organization. In a reserve fund, you have full access to the fund balance at any time. So that's important to understand, that if you have $100,000 in there and your votes and you need $20,000, you send an email, ECCF will cut the check and we'll get it to you. We do not take expenditure responsibility. So we're not going to say, why do you need that money, and have you really thought through it? These are your assets to be requested as you need them. Then you go to the endowed fund, which works very similarly, except for the fact that these are really assets that are assigned a much longer term goal for. And that a lot of times we think about funds coming out of an endowment fund as as golden funds, right? Some development director told me that one time, right? It's not money you have to go out and raise. It's money that you anticipate coming in from this investment fund every year. Right now, the annual distribution of our endowed funds are based on ECCF's spending policy, which is set by the board of directors here at the Community Foundation. And right now it's 4.5% of the market value of the preceding 20 quarters. So you will have available to your organization every year in an endow fund the opportunity to take that spending policy, which we calculate for you, as a distribution to your organization. There's no requirement that you take it on an annual basis, but it is available to you. Essentially, you've asked us to sort of put a little bit of a restriction on that because of the associated goals that you have with those assets. We can dive into all the questions, and I'm sure I just came up with that very broad description, but now I'm going to hand it over to Jen to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty.
Thanks, Stacey. So, from a high level, I like to think about nonprofit funds as simply your organization investing alongside ECCF into the investment pools that we're already curating for the 130 million of assets we currently have under management. So the way we do that is we really think about and have developed this program with these 3 milestones and pillars in mind: fund management, mission alignment, and investment expertise. And so we will talk about all 3 as we go along here, thinking about ECCF as your investment partner. But for right now, let's focus on our investment expertise. And I think the point that really jumps out here is that ECCF is solely managing charitable funds for the long term. That is all we do. We are stewards of, as I mentioned, 130 million of charitable funds already. So we have developed an investment strategy and investment program that is focused on protecting and growing those assets over the long term. So what does our investment expertise look like? As I mentioned, the strategy is steady asset growth while managing risk and cost, and seeking to preserve and grow the real purchasing power of the underlying assets. We're not out there chasing market returns. We're not changing our investment strategy as the market moves. We are, of course, monitoring the market. We are making decisions about asset allocation strategies to ensure that we are protecting the assets and ensuring that real purchasing power growth that we're looking for. But the investment strategy is not changing over time. We've been doing this for 25 years. We're going to be doing it into the long-term future. And we have kept this investment strategy the same. Our investment strategy is enacted by our investment committee. And so our investment committee, we are honored to have volunteer investment professionals who provide their expertise to us in curating our investment portfolios. So that allows us to pass on that cost savings for not having to pay an investment manager through our investment pools. And our investment committee manages to a board-approved investment policy statement. Again, there's many layers here of people who are ensuring, of experts that are ensuring that we are honoring our goal and our mission of growing and protecting charitable assets. And so what exactly are you investing in through a nonprofit fund? Well, it's pooled investment funds. And we have 2 options, which I will go into on the next slide. But let's talk about what that means. It means that we are investing at a larger scale because we're investing that 130 million of assets. So we can pass those economies of scale, those savings, those lower investment fees, all of those things that are typically unavailable to smaller funds get passed on to our nonprofit funds because you are joining in our pooled investment funds. So what are those investment portfolios? I mentioned there are 2, and they look very similar. So we have a general investment pool, which is a global balanced investment strategy with a small percentage of private equity. It's going to be conservatively invested in 65% equities, 35% bonds, and it's provided a 1-year return of over 17%. And we like to highlight that that's above the benchmark that our board has set for our investment pools of 16.22%. So through our investment committee's careful market monitoring and asset allocation, they've been able to outperform our benchmark, both in our general investment pool and also in our ESG investment pool. Our ESG investment pool looks very similar in composition to our general investment pool, except that the funds and managers that are underlying the investment pool only invest in companies that focus on governance, sustainable environmental principles, and proactive social responsibility. And so that investment pool has a slightly lower return at 16.87%. And I'm sorry, that should say a 1-year return, not a 3-year return. And versus the 1-year benchmark of 16.22%. And I think it's important to note that even though these pools are investing in different managers and different underlying funds, they are held to the same benchmark by our board. The other pillar we talked about at the beginning was fund management. And this is a really important point of a nonprofit fund because it offers nonprofit organizations both continuity in the investment program and support for the organization overall. So let's tackle both of those separately. So continuity, we know that through nonprofit board and staff turnover, that sometimes the investment strategy, the investment program can be one of the hardest things to transition. And through that transition, things can get lost, expertise is lost, administration is lost, and it takes a lot of time to train on an investment program. With a nonprofit fund, ECCF is a stable partner who is here, who can help manage that board and staff turnover as a partner who is able to kind of do the education, do the management, do the administration, and be there for board and staff when there are questions. So it ensures that important oversight and administration is consistently upheld. The other thing is as a long-term investment partner, our investment policy and strategy does not change. It remains focused on protecting and growing charitable assets. As I mentioned before, we're not chasing market returns. We're not consistently moving in and out of products. We're trying to maintain steady, stable asset growth. And so that provides continuity in the program as well. And then from a simple administration standpoint, we provide comprehensive monthly investment portfolio performance reports. We support annual audit requirements and reporting needs. And we have a donor portal that provides 24/7 online access to fund information. But I think the simplest thing to take away here is we are people. We are here at your local community foundation. We are available to you for any questions, help, support you need. If you have new board members that come on and want to understand more about what a nonprofit fund is, we are available to come meet with them. And questions are just a phone call away. So what does this cost? ECCF charges management fees on our nonprofit funds that start at 75 basis points on funds that are $1 million or under and goes down from there. So you can see our schedule of fees on this slide. The fees cover the administrative costs, the access to our nonprofit services support team, and our yearly board registration for our Institute for Trustees. But we also invite you to think of these fees as a reinvestment in the community as they support the community leadership efforts that Stacy talked about at the beginning of the presentation. I'll turn it back over to Stacy.
So here's where we come back around and really sort of nail home this idea that this is more than just a product in and of itself, but a product inside of a larger partnership with the community foundation. And so as a nonprofit fund, this is, we offer a series of benefits that are really related to building your capacity as an organization. The first is that, you receive an assigned relationship manager. And from what we have heard from many of our nonprofit funds is that this is really important, right? We field calls all the time around specific questions that are coming up from your board, be it related to this fund or be it related to something else. Just knowing that an actual human being is going to pick up the phone and they know about you and they know about your fund is a really important thing, again, to keep you focused and your time focused on the things that matter most. Second is that you as a nonprofit fund, for your executive director and all of your board, your entire board, you have complimentary registration to our annual Institute for Trustees, which is actually coming up in March. And later in the presentation, we have a link and we'll share that with you afterwards. But this is what has now become a very, very well-known incredible resource that is focused on building capacity and of board members, really. So there are a series of, I think, 30 workshops over 6 to 8 weeks that are diving into the core competencies that every board member and what a board as a whole should be thinking about. These are expert-led workshops that are really curated just for you. And as a nonprofit fund, you have free access to those, and we record them as well. So there's really an evergreen nature to that as well. We, over the last year, in working with the current nonprofit funds that we have started to understand that there are actually some really detailed pieces of information or expertise that they're trying to build. And so we're beginning to build this series of expert-led workshops. And the one that we're going to be kicking off this year is one that we're calling Unlocking Non-Cash Assets. So when you have, especially like an endowment or a reserve fund, you have the ability through ECCF, and this is where I'm contradicting myself from before, to be able to accept some of those more complex, complicated gifts. We will consider on a case-by-case basis, if you had a donor that said, hey, you know, I have a particular asset, maybe a percentage of my estate, or even a percentage of a business that I want to gift into your endowment or to your reserve fund. ECCF has the back office capacity to be able to consider that, which we do on a case-by-case basis. So in those really unique times, it's important to know that your fundraising strategies can be boosted by a partnership with ECCF, but even just understanding what those look like. We're going to bring together some professional advisors from the local community to start to talk to you, your board, about just some strategies around that. And you can expect more of those tailored workshops that come directly from conversations with the nonprofits we're working with. And this is brandy new here in the last couple of months. We offer our nonprofit fund holders free membership to something called Catch a Fire, which is a national organization that supports nonprofit capacity building by offering volunteer engagement with leading professionals across business industries. So you can go onto this really cool site and type in a project that you need, as big as, you know, strategic planning help, as nuanced as, you know, management coaching for somebody on your team. Or I think we even used it for like an org chart project. You can type that in, you build a little project, and then a volunteer is assigned. You get to interview that volunteer, and then they get to work with you for free over a period of time. So nonprofit funds get access to that service for free, which we know is really a huge value add. And then finally, you know, the third piece of the puzzle here, as you're thinking about these nonprofit funds at ECCF, is that it really is an alignment to your mission as a nonprofit in Essex County. I think we would all agree that aligning, especially your investment strategies, with your organization and your mission is becoming increasingly important, especially for those of you that have endowment funds or reserve funds and are doing this kind of fundraising. Your donors are going to be asking this question because they're hearing about it in the marketplace. You know, ECCF acts as a really simple conduit to that ESG strategy, as Jen already shared. And in addition, you know, the fees that ECCF are collecting, as we mentioned, are going back to our organization as a nonprofit, right? So we talk to all of our fund holders in this way. You're paying fees, there's a cost of doing this work one way or another. It could go to a large institution, commercial bank in Boston, we won't name names, or it could come to your local community foundation, thereby sort of doubling the impact of that, of those charitable dollars. And of course, we're a nonprofit in Essex County. You're a nonprofit in Essex County. What could get better than that? And I would even, I would probably proffer that some of the donors on your list are also donors to ECCF. So this becomes a very natural relationship that your donors can feel really comfortable with. And just to belabor the point, because that's what we're here to do, I'm not going to read this slide to you, but I think, you know, hearing from a third party individual, somebody who is the, you know, chair of a larger organization as to why they choose ECCF, you know, we didn't feed this to this person. This person came back and said this to us, so that really that benefit is felt across the organization, from investment to partnership. And fundraising and learning and all of that. So the last piece before we open it up to questions is actually, this is just sort of representative of the ongoing conversation around partnership with who we are as an organization. So we just want to make you aware of a few different resources in the nonprofit available to you in the nonprofit community. We talked about our annual Institute for Trustees. We'll follow this presentation with these slides and a recording, and you'll be able to link all of this. If you haven't checked it out, you really, really should. It is just, there's nothing like it to have that kind of level of expertise here available to you. Impala, for those of you who haven't checked it out, you, as Massachusetts nonprofit, have free access to Impala, which is basically becoming kind of like the new Candid or the new Charity Navigator, as I'm sure many of you are aware of. But the data that they're sharing is just so much more in depth and presented in a way that can help donors understand your organization, and you understand the funding community and the ecosystems of funding networks. It's worth it for you to go poke around. And then if you're curious about learning more, you can reach out to us. We have a really significant partnership with them. So happy to help you. Another quick resource here, Envision is a media agency in Essex County that has asked us to share this opportunity with Essex County nonprofits. They are really a storytelling organization. They make the most incredible impact-oriented, social justice-oriented videos, and they're currently taking applications to consider a partner for 2024 to do some free pro bono work. And really, they're incredible. So check them out. I think it's Envision Productions, I think, is if you're going to do a little Googling right now. But and then the other resource is just something, again, that come across our desks that we share out to you. There is a training coming up, Essentials to Behavioral Health Training, that you can see as a free one-day training to all nonprofit staff, and some really important work as you think about serving your frontline organizations that are serving the community. So just take a look at those. We just want to share those since we had a captive audience, but we'll follow up with some of that, those resources separately. So we're going to stop sharing now, and we're going to stop talking unless you have a question. So you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, however you'd like to do it. And no question is too small or too big. We'll see.
So I have a question.
Great.
How have the ECCF funds performed, say, relative to external benchmarks like the S&P 500? Question.
Sorry, great question. So those benchmarks, that benchmark number that I shared, the 16.22%, is a blended external benchmark. So it's blending that 65-35 composition of our investment portfolio is being replicated in public benchmarks to arrive at that 16.22%. So it is outperforming our public benchmarks weighted for the composition of our investment portfolios.
Equities and bonds.
Correct.
I understand.
And we will share, as a part of our follow-up, we publish monthly investment performance reports on both of those investment pools. We post them on our website, and we actually just posted December's, I think, this week. So we'll follow with you, but and show you where you can find them ongoing on our website.
Okay. Is the investment policy statement available somewhere online?
We can, not online, but we can share it with you. Absolutely. We'll follow up with everybody.
That would be interesting.
Okay.
There's been a trend for many kinds of investing to go toward passive rather than active fund management. What would ECCF consider the advantage of active management? Would it be much better performance, or what would it be that would make that a better approach to investing funds?
I'm going to turn that over to our CFO, who's a CFA. So go ahead, Britt.
Yeah, thanks, Stan. Well, that's obviously debated in investment management circles for years, whether or not passive actually is better than. And I recommend reading A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Berkman Malkiel, who will go ad nauseum into that question. But our approach, I'll give you our approach. We are not active managers. We don't try and outguess the market. We do think that in large asset classes, The market is fairly efficient, but there are trends, or shall I say, areas of investment that may be underrepresented, and there are ways of adjusting your asset allocation that would take advantage of that. And so we do look at areas in that to try and to find and seek alpha outside of what our normal benchmark is. Our bogey or our benchmark, we're trying to beat each and every day. But if we will not be going and chasing Alaskan real estate because we think that's going to outperform. That's just not something ECCF is going to do. But we will see that if international small caps have the potential to beat the benchmark, we'll invest in that asset class. But as far as active management, we're not chasing the next FANG stock or anything like that. We believe that the larger asset classes, large cap growth, large cap value, are fairly well represented in the assets that we invest in. So did that answer your question?
Yeah,
That's what also keeps the fees low as well.
Yeah, that's the other, right. Yeah, Beth, yeah, we are very conscious on fees, and generally, if you do look at our assets that we invest in now, our fees are, Jen mentioned the ability to get lower fees because we do have economies of scale is one of them, but we also don't invest in very many active managers because the fees do go can raise quite quickly.
well, no, help me again. The fees go to what? Is that how are the fees used?
Yeah, so I like to think about fees in fees versus costs. So the fees that we provided on the slide, those are fees to ECCF. You'll see them as a line item on your statement, and they are
Right.
the fees to cover our administrative costs, right? They're the fees that you're going to pay to any manager, right, for administrative costs. What the numbers I provided, the returns I provided, are net of is investment cost, which is the cost of accessing the investment products that comprise the investment portfolios in the market. So for example, when we send you our investment performance reports, you will see what funds underlie each investment portfolio. There will be a number of, you'll notice a number of Vanguard funds. Those are going to be relatively inexpensive to access, right? 10 basis points or less. There may be other funds that are selected for reasons that the investment committee views cost versus value that may be more expensive, which ends up with a blended investment cost of our investment pools of around 50 basis points. But that 17.02% is net of those investment costs. So you never see them as a cost, and they aren't a fee to ECCF. They are our cost to purchase the investment portfolio in the market.
So are those the fees then that you mentioned, or are the fees over and above that activity cost?
Right. The fees are to ECCF, and those come out from your statement. That's fees. Costs are to purchase a Vanguard fund in the market, and the returns that you see, both that I've presented here, but also the gain loss on your statement, is net of those investment costs. And those costs do not go to ECCF.
Okay, so that.
Sorry, hold on one second. Stan, I love your,
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I just want to
sorry,
make sure that we have enough time. We'll come back.
Yeah,
And Stan, if we want to have a deeper conversation about this, we totally can. And I just want to make sure there's a couple other folks I know that have questions too.
thanks.
So Paul, I'm
Yeah.
looking at you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stacy. Paul Kirker from Eastern Bank, and I'm on the board at Hawk and on the finance committee. A couple quick questions, and I may have missed this. Forgive me. Is there a minimum investment amount?
There is a minimum investment amount. It's $25,000.
Okay. Also, would anyone be willing to join the Hawk Finance Committee in a Teams or Zoom call to sort of review this program?
Yes, we do that all the time. So
We'll do that.
We will probably figure it out as a team. So you tell us, we'll talk offline and find a time. But yeah, that was what I was referring to at the beginning. We do that kind of tailored
I think that would be
presentation all the time.
valuable. That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you. And I
Thank
got to run to another meeting, so
All
I'm
right.
sorry I have to leave.
Thanks a
Nice
lot,
to
Paul.
see you.
We'll follow up.
Thanks
Marcus,
very
go
much.
ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Marcus Fisher from the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence. A couple of questions. Would your investment return results be available beyond the 1 year and 3 year that you highlighted here? I would be curious about that. And also, I would like to know who's on your investment committee,
Yeah.
who those professionals are.
Perfect. So you know what, and even in lieu of following up while we're talking here, I'll drop in the chat a link to our investment management page on our website, which will allow you to click through and see the bios of all of our investment committee members. And when you scroll down a little bit, you'll see where it says the ESG investment pool and the general fund investment pool. Each of those investment performance reports are linked right there, and they do show, I think, 1, 3, 5, and since inception. So I will put that in the chat right now for you.
Okay, great.
And Marcus, you'll probably notice some overlap on our investment committee with some of donors that you probably know.
I'm sure I will.
All right. Anybody else have a question? Yeah, Julie.
Hi, how do you guys determine annual payout for endowment?
It's a board policy that the board, I think, revisits. Beth, is it every 3 years, I think, that they come and have a conversation with? But you know,
if it's an endowed fund, and it's created as an endowed fund here, then it's based on every 3 years, our board will vote on what the percentage is. And it's been, depending on COVID years or non-COVID years, it's been around 4.5% annually. But I would say that the vast majority of our nonprofit funds are not endowed. They're reserve funds. So it's really up to your organization to determine what your spend, if it is an endowment that you have and you're investing it with us in this way as a nonprofit fund, it's whatever your organization is setting for your own policy. If it comes here as an endowed fund, then it follows our endowment, our spend policy. Does that help? And it's for all of our endowed funds here at the Community Foundation are in a 4.5% right now.
Okay, and then I guess my other question would be, how far in advance do we, depending on how our fiscal year aligns with your fiscal year, how far in advance would we know for certain what that percentage would be?
we calculate our so we run on July to June fiscal year, and so we run our available to spend calculations in that first month of the year of our fiscal year. So we would be able to let you know. We should talk though, because as Beth is saying, right, and many nonprofits choose to establish, at least initially, a reserve fund that they can utilize as an endowed fund, right? But that also gives them the flexibility of accessing beyond that sort of 4.5%, right? We always.
No, I understand that. We are thinking specifically about an endowment.
Okay,
so
perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. So that would be the timing. Thanks. Anybody else have a question? Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So we are totally different kind of nonprofit from most of the people you have here, obviously.
Sure.
I personally am not super knowledgeable about the differences between like endowment and reserve and all that. So I definitely want to set up a time to talk with y'all so I understand that better, and maybe we can have y'all come to our board also.
Great.
But I do have a question. I noticed you said when I was looking at the slide on the basis point thing, which I don't understand exactly what basis points are, but my curiosity is that typically most organizations, when I see, like when we signed up with the American Association of Community Theater or EMACT here locally, the less money you have, the lower your costs are. But for here, it looked like it was reversed, because it said 75 for under 1 million, 50 basis points for like 1 to 5, and then over 5 million, it's 25. So I'm just trying to understand why it's basically the reverse of what most organizations with which we're used to dealing do. You know what I mean?
Jen, do you want to talk about it?
Yes.
Go for it.
So I just don't understand. Yes, that's definitely, we need to understand that too, as to why you have the reverse kind of organization as far as fees go.
It's in some ways like an incentive to a degree, right? Like it's not necessarily like a are these membership organizations that you're talking about?
Yes, they are membership organizations. Yeah.
So you know, I'm probably not the best one to answer this in terms of like how this fits in the overall like financial industry, but essentially, right, this isn't necessarily a fee that you're paying out of pocket that looks like, oh, if your budget is this size, then you pay this level of membership, or if your budget
Okay.
is this size, you pay this level of membership. That's not really apples to apples. It's very common, sort of the larger, it's the more assets you have, the lower the fee, right? It's
Okay.
yeah, but we should talk,
That's
Lucy.
what I
Yeah.
kind of thought. I just wanted to make sure my logical reasoning was working.
Yeah. No, it's a definitely like, given your standpoint, it's a very good question. But yeah, we can chat for sure to make sure you understand all of it after.
All right, thank you.
I think Rebecca may have had your hand up and then it's down. I'm not sure. Rebecca, if you have a question.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
Is this presentation or the slides and all, is it something that you could send out or I could share with my board?
Yes, absolutely. We'll follow with an email that has both the recording of this presentation, the slide presentation, and some additional resources for you to check out. We'll also provide you with a copy of the nonprofit fund agreement so that you can start to look through some of the things that we've actually talked about today and how it fits in with actually establishing the fund, some of the decisions that you would need to make. So yes, we will share all of this with you and you can do with it what you will.
Very good, thank you.
Sure. Yes, Ed.
I do, and it's just simple vocabulary, but back in the beginning when you were talking about how we access the money back out again, you used the word grant, which
Yeah.
to me sounds like there's some application and decision making, and we don't have to prove that we're good enough to get our money back, do we?
No, it's an excellent question. And it is like, you know, words are important and there's this industry can get a little jargony, right? So it really is, these are your assets and we should be very clear about that, right? Like these are assets that sit on your books. They are your assets. They sit on your books. They sit on our books as an asset and a liability, right? So in a reserve fund, if you need a portion of that reserve fund, you have 2 authorized representatives request that. We don't ask you what you need it for. We don't have it is your money to do with what you will. We will process your grant or the check out of the fund into your nonprofit organization.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. That's good.
Sure. And then if I understand this right, it sounded like the primary decision we have to make is whether we want the reserve fund or the endowed fund. Is that basically correct?
Yes, that's a major decision. Go ahead, Jen.
And
I like to say that there's two decisions really for a nonprofit fund. The first is reserve versus endowed, and the second is investment strategy. So
that was the rest of my question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep. So the second is, and you know, we can be flexible. And what I didn't mention on our investment strategy page is that we also have a money market for a portion that needs, you know, that wants to be sitting in cash for whatever purpose. And we can be flexible to develop an investment strategy that encompasses 1, 2, or 3 of the investment choices. So you can do a third in all of the pools if you'd like.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes,
I just
Michael.
had one more question in regard to the support that you provide for audits. I mean, this endowment audit has been part of our annual audit, and you would provide all the backup information on that?
Yes.
I believe Britt will even get on the phone with your CPA if he needs to, correct?
Yeah. No, we do that. We do that for a lot of our nonprofits. Their outside audit firms send us the request list, and we fill out all of the the rest, all of the paperwork and give them back up to check the box.
Thanks.
Sounds pretty good. I mean, I know I'm biased, but sounds pretty good.
Right, there's just a quick question from Rebecca about the money market, and I just don't have that number to hand.
I am looking at it right now. I'm trying to get to it. It's SGUXX is the money market fund we use. It's a Schwab government money market. And I'm getting a yield right now. Bear with me. Performance. Where are you? 5.17.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes, when he said 5.17, this is Hal Morse with the North Shore Players.
Great.
Is that per year? Rick?
That's the 7-day yield. So yes, you would be, if you kept it in for the whole year, you get 5.17%.
Very attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as we all know, the money rates have bounced back. We've had numerous years through COVID where we're right around zero. But we have seen rates increase markedly. They've not helped the bond market in 2022, but none of the asset classes were up in 2022. 23, we saw a huge bounce back. S&P was up over 24% or something like that. And so, but we really look at our portfolios against the benchmark, right? That's great, but we do have a 35%, which is based on fixed income, which didn't yield 24% last year. So we really look at our benchmark, which is standard and fixed. So
Fantastic. Thank you.
yep.
All right. Thank you all so much for spending time with us today. As I've mentioned many times, we'll follow up with many resources, and that really this is meant to be a broad brush presentation around how this works. So happy to follow up with each and every one of you to talk about how this might fit. And the wonderful thing about being in this position is that this is not a hard sell, right? This isn't a buy now and it never comes back again. This is really about presenting a resource to help you and your organizations think through what's available. So if it doesn't make sense for you now, it might make sense for you a year from now. Great, let's come and talk about it. Just know that we're here in all of the capacity that we can be to support your work. And thank you very much for what you're doing every day to make Essex County better. So thanks so much. Have a great day. Look, check it off your list. You've done it. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.